go ahead and get started and feel free to sit at the table, those of you feel free to sit in. So good evening. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Lynette Hall. I am the Community Engagement Manager for the City of Sacramento. And today we'll be talking about the African American experience, what the project is, how you all can get involved. We'll do a little question and answer so I can kind of explain a really kind of complex document. And then we will turn it over to our consultants. You'll get an opportunity to meet them. Some are here, some will be coming in Zoom. And so you'll get an opportunity to see the full team. And then they're gonna walk through this document. As you can see, this is a lot. And so, and there's probably still more. This is the first draft. So if there's something missing, you'll have an opportunity to provide your input. So you'll be able to take this home with you and kind of make some notes on it. So I will turn it over to Carson.
Don't we have everyone in the room say who they are?
Well, I'm gonna-
Oh, okay, so I'm Carson Anderson. I'm the former Historic Preservation Director for the city. I retired last year, but I got kind of pulled back in because this project excited me and I wanted to be part of it and help it be successful.
And before we move on, Sean, who is the current Historic Preservation Director, he is sick. And so he is actually on Zoom, but he wanted to let you all know that the reason he is not here is because he is sick. So I'm just introducing Sean for him.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dawn Wilson. I'm here. We were invited by Ms. Hall, Ms. Ella Hall, so here to get some more knowledge and see where we can help out.
And feel free to maybe say just really briefly how long you've been in Sacramento or your family and what area is your family.
Okay, so I'm born and raised in Sacramento. Family has been here since the 70s. And we've been either part from North Sacramento, from the north area to the south area. We own homes in Greenhaven and Oak Park.
I am Kathy Delaney. I'm Don's mother. Been here since about 1970. My mother was Betty Williams. Moved here, and at that time she worked for the state for fair employment and housing, and she was the first president of brought National Council of Negro Women to this area.
Me? Hi, I'm Gabrielle Knox and I'm Matt Hall's daughter.
I'm Henry Hughes. I'm the preservation planner for the city of Sacramento.
Hi, my name is Tasha Keys. I've been a resident in Meadowview since 1985. My parents came here in like the 70s. My dad's from Iowa and my mom is from Southern California.
Hello, my name is Trace Ortega and I've been in the Sacramento Oak Road area since 2007 from the Bay Area.
I'm Zanoni Gibson. My family moved from Mississippi to Sacramento in 1996. Stayed with my cousin Ella for a while until my parents got a home in Del Paso Heights. So we were actually in Del Paso Heights since 1956. There were 7 of us, and we all graduated from Grant from 65, and the last one was 78. So we've been here for a while. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Edna Holland, and from Southern Cal, Louisiana. Been here in Sacramento since 2000. Came up with ex Mark Diamond, from Diamond's son, and been here in Sacramento since.
Jay King, been in Del Paso Heights since 1965. From Orville, California, born and raised in Orville, grew up in the Bay Area, Sacramento.
My name is Carl Kelly. I'm Lynette's mom. And I came to Sacramento in 1954 from Mississippi. But I got a history, and so from now on, we really have stories to tell in terms of, you know, what we went through in terms of why our parents are here. So That's my granddaughter, Gabrielle.
I am Elgin Bradley. Moved to Sacramento in 1963 from the great state of Texas. And lived in Oak Park, graduated Sacramento High School. Until I left, went to Southern California, and I could not get well, so I came back.
And probably, I think, the oldest Black business property owner currently here. I don't know who. I think.
First, I prefer loans.
The owner of Touch of Class, for those of you, I'm sure we all have cut a rug in the Touch of Class.
I am Rhonda Brady, initially from the East Coast, came in 71 and have been back and forth. I'm back now, recently retired. I am a homeowner resident.
I am Erica Bradley. I've been here since '69, and my family came down here. Yeah. So.
I am Jeff Solomon. When I retired, I moved to Elk Grove, Meadowview about 7 years ago.
Melissa Goodrow, I'm with Page and Turnbull. I've been in Sacramento since 2005. Claire Flynn, also with Page and Turnbull, and I'm also Sacramento native. I've been here since '89. My name is Drew Bounds, and I am originally from New York City. I was born and raised in Harlem. My parents were from Georgia, and my father was an illegal immigrant from the Caribbean. And I have lived in San Francisco in California. I've lived in San Francisco and Davis, and I've been here in Sacramento for the last 9 years. And I'm a consultant with Page and Turnbull.
And it's doctor now.
And it's doctor.
And then we'll go on the side and. Guys, start, but we'll start with you.
Moved to California in reading of what's back when we said. I live in Meadowview since 1984.
My name is Kyle Heights.
How long have you been in Sacramento? What area?
Well, I went to McClatchy, graduated from there in Sac City College, so I've been here in high school. McClatchy school.
Hi, my name is Brady King. I'm on the community engagement team for the city of Sacramento. I'm native of Sacramento, Oak Park area.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carmen Davis. I originally moved to Sacramento from Memphis, Tennessee in 2004. My family and I, we used to live here on Johnston Drive. However, I saw you on the news last night, and I thought it was something interesting to learn and come to learn about the area that I currently reside on in Oak Grove.
Like the life goes on Arkansas. And in Sacramento since 1960, all known military. I ended up back there.
Well, thank you. I think it's important for us to just see who's in the room, so that we can network and fellowship. So many of you have heard, the city of Sacramento is looking to document African-American history. So we're going to talk about exactly how that's going to be done. So, Carson, why now? Why is the city of Sacramento caring about Black history and wanting to document? Why now?
Well, it's not brand new, but the money's new. We got a grant at the end of last year from the National Trust, which is like the United States Preservation Entity, and it's a grant for $50,000. And that is to be seed money for this effort to come up with a historical overview of Black history in Sacramento. The fancy word for that is historic context statement. To do oral history, because one of the first things we heard when we had our meeting with our community partners was do a storycorps type thing where you go out and you get people to tell their stories. We know that you can find some written materials about the really prominent folks, the first in their field, those kind of folks, yes, their stories will probably be told. But how about just more ordinary people, what their lives were like here in Sacramento? So that was one of the things that we're going to be doing as part of this project. We're going to have been partnering with Sacramento State. The students in their graduate history program have been helping us gather in some of the material, doing some of the research that we need to support this effort. But we've been thinking about this for a good decade. So this is like first really big step towards doing something this magnitude.
So you mentioned $50,000 grant. How much of that is going back into community?
20% of that is for stipends to members of the community, so that those of you who want to go out and talk with relatives of yours or people in the community that you know and get their stories on tape and just use your smartphone. And we have questions that you can ask, or you can come up with your own questions. And sit down some Sunday evening over coffee and record the story of people that we think that would be interested in hearing about. So that's one of the uses of the stipend. There are also people in the community who are historians. They may not have the fancy credential from a university or college, but they have inside of them stories about how neighborhoods developed and who was who and where they were and what they did. And so this is a way to compensate them for their time and their effort in supporting Separate by sharing their knowledge with us. This is a response to the recognition in the urban planning field of the level of systemic racism that has existed over a long period of time. That kind of racism that determined where freeways were cited and determined redlining and zoning and all sorts of things that had bad economic impacts on Black communities. So this is best practice. This is a way so we don't just pay our consultants to help us, but we also reimburse you for the efforts you make in helping us.
And I appreciate that, and you'll have an opportunity to hear from the consultant, but how was the consultant selected?
Oh, yeah, so we had a request for proposals. Before we sent it out, we reached around to some of the other communities that have done studies like this. So the city of San Francisco, Portland, Los Angeles, to kind of get a read on the language, like whether we have the right details in it to get a good group of people to respond. We issued the RFP. We didn't get the kind of response that we wanted. We sat down with Lynette's office and with our equity and diversity manager at the city and kind of talked through how we could bolster this, make it do better outreach, make it really get the attention of people that you get. And so then we sent it out again into the world, got 6 proposals. We brought together a panel to look at all those proposals, kind of objectivize. So myself, Lynette, a member of the Historic Preservation Commission, Sean, who's on the Zoom meeting with us, and one of our African-American senior people building division, who spends a good deal of her time looking at proposals. So we got together, we looked at them, we scored them, and that's how we came up with our consultant for the unanimous high choice of the review panel.
And before we move on, I just want to kind of address the elephant in the room, that we chose a consultant that is not an African-American consultant. And I knew there was going to be some pushback on that. But they were the best. I had an opportunity to review the proposals that we received. This is a very specific field, and this is what they do. It's not like they do a whole bunch of other stuff. Like this is what they focus on, historic context statements. So we just didn't have any African-American folks that submitted proposals that was even close. And so, another thing that really stood out with their proposal was their partner, who you all will have opportunity to meet, Dr. Damani Fisher, from the Fisher family. Damani is from Sacramento. Those of you in here probably know, Ples Fisher, Maisha Fisher. And so these are also on the project, and you'll get a chance to hear about his background as well. He's gonna zoom in, he's on the East Coast. So you'll have opportunity to ask him any questions as well. And
Imani did his dissertation on housing segregation in Sacramento, which is a brilliant bit of research on his part, and sort of telling the story of housing.
And Dr. Valley was also a partner on the project as well. So I just wanted to clear that out because I know I've been very critical in the past. And so I encourage you all to get to know the consultant. I think they're going to do an amazing job, but they can only do what we give them. So it is so important for us to get involved. And so Sean, who is not here, heard the concerns, and he went out and found more money so that we could provide stipends to community, African-American residents here. Because what we don't want is for to not pay people for their time. And so that's become a best practice for us to provide stipends for people's time and energy. And so
And that's a match of 20%
of that
the total
50,000.
grant of grant amount, which is 50,000.
So there's two pieces. We have this historic context statement, and then there's the oral histories. So before we get to the oral histories, I had never heard about historic context statements before this project. So what will we do with this document? How will this document be used?
So it's a fancy word, historic context statement. So what it does is it looks at kind of in an overview sense, the history of Black folks in a community, how they arrived, where they came from, where they settled in the community over time, the businesses they created. These are sort of the themes that that our document and other documents done in other communities look at. What were the churches, mosques that the community established? Who were the business leaders? What were the civic organizations like the Women's Civic Improvement Club and other organizations that Black folks in the community established? And what was the cultural arts and the entertainment sports sector? Who were the people out of Sacramento who excel in that arena? So those are some of the things that are looked at. And then what we do with the information is we go out later and we try and find pieces of land and individuals who embody some of the topics that are talked about in the document. And so there's a way of recognizing them formally, informally, through public arts projects. And then the other thing is so that the planning process, so that we get beyond the past where we have freeways go through neighborhoods and we have, things get knocked down because we didn't know what they were. So this helps us figure out where the historic resources are so that not at the 11th hour when the bulldozer's waiting to knock something down, but well ahead of time, the urban planning staff can do proper planning and try and protect, preserve, and commemorate and acknowledge the history that's in the community. Another use would be to build on this. This is like a first leg of the process. The grant is really kind of small. We're doing like $250,000 worth of work for $50,000 and the stipend money that we have matching that. But that money only goes so far. So there's so many more things that we hope will happen in the future. And that's why we're kind of turning to all of you to help us get there. And One way to help all that happen is to get grant money, get additional grant money from other sources, from the humanities and arts sector, from the development community, wherever it is, the state government, to do other projects that are going to preserve Black culture, Black identity, Black historic resources.
So, I just want to hone in and give some concrete examples on how this document can be used, right? So, for instance, I'll give 2 examples. I have been trying to build relationships with JP Morgan and Chase because they have a advancing Black pathways program that comes into cities that have a high number of African Americans. They provide funding to buy houses, they provide funding for Black businesses, but they only go to neighborhoods and areas and cities where there's a high concentration of African Americans. So they've told me, you know, we're willing to build relationships with Sacramento if you guys can prove, you know, a compelling way or reason that we need to be there. This could be a start to document. We have something that documents. We've had African Americans here that have had a strong presence for a long time. Another use of this is, we all know the Observer has tons of information that needs to be archived, right? Like if you want to find something from 1970 or 80, you got to go back there and look through papers, right? That's ridiculous. It needs to be digitized. But that's on $3-4 million
Millions of dollars
for the Sac Observer to digitize their newspapers. Well, you know, once this document is complete, perhaps he can seek a grant funding utilizing this document to say, like, we have an African-American presence, we've been here for a long time. So we're hoping that this document helps us to get additional funding. The second part is the oral history. We have to tell our stories so other people don't tell it for us. And so it's great to find things that are written, but we know written documents change all the time. They get edited, they change. We want to hear voices from people in our community. So it is so important that we get oral history. We'll talk a little bit about how you can record your oral history on your phone and send it in. You can make arrangements for students at Sac State to come take your oral histories. We are hosting and sponsoring an event at Shiloh Baptist Church on Saturday, where they will be recording oral histories in person for some of the elders at that church. So that's just one of the ways. So let's talk a little bit about, and are there any questions so far before I move on?
You had a couple of people who come in who haven't introduced themselves. I like to know who this guy is sitting behind me.
Oh, but like introduce yourself, please.
Well, my name is Bertrand Bradley.
Okay, how long have you been in Sacramento and kind of what area?
Since 63, Oak Park, really Oak Park. From there, then I moved over here to the South area.
Okay.
And then the Gulf.
Okay, well, come on back. We'll turn it over. We got a couple of folks here that just came in. Yeah.
My name is Jermaine Lester. I'm from this neighborhood. Thank y'all.
My name is Ron Kelly. I have R. Kelly Farms that serves the Sacramento area for 30 years.
Also want to stand. Okay, so we talked about the historic context statement, we talked about oral history. How long do people have to, let's talk a little bit about the timeline, or will you guys talk about the timeline? Okay, so like, how long is this project, when is this, how many drafts will there be? And when is the last time people can submit oral histories?
So what you're looking at today is the first draft of this historic overview document. We're going to allow the community, all of you, to submit your comments to us. It's posted online, so people can look at it and engage with it. One of the things that you can do, this is stipend worthy, is get a group of your friends or people that you think would be interested in this and go through the document together and then pull all your comments together and submit them to us. And that's something that probably could merit a stipend for it. It varies on how many hours you want to be involved in it. So you can work like $100 to maybe $600 at the top end. That's so you don't get taxed on it. And then if there's some involvement, the project's going to go on to go to the core of the next question. The project will go on through about the end of May of next year. The second draft of this will come out probably towards the end of March. March, beginning of April next year. So there's some time for you to look at it. We would invite you to get it in just to assist our consultant. If you could get comments on this draft back by the 15th of December, that would be extremely helpful. If you can't, there will be that second draft that's coming out next year in about April or March, beginning of April, late March. And then you have another opportunity to look at the second draft of the document and provide comments. So all the way up through, I would say, the end of April, beginning of May of next year, you can record oral history. Actually, you can continue recording your oral histories, family stories past that. But to impact this project, we're going to need your details by, say, the end of April. Very first week of May.
So we have time to get this right. And so this is our fourth meeting. This is our fourth public meeting. We've been going back and forth between Del Paso Heights, Meadowview, and Oak Park. And so tell a friend, tell a family member, because again, we have to tell our story. They can only do what we give them. And so we need your input. We've been, I love to see that there's a lot of new faces here. And so we've seen some people that come to every meeting, but it's great to see new faces coming. So the word is getting out slowly but surely, and that is exactly what we want to do.
I'll give you an illustration of what Lynette's talking about. So some of the people, the Irene Wests, the people that were like the first in their field, there'll be an obituary, there'll be a write-up, there'll be a church bulletin that describes their history and all the things that they did in their life. Del Paso Heights, we have so little written down. The stories are probably in the high schools that serve the areas. They're probably in the memories of you all, your parents, your grandparents. And without that layer, we don't really have a complete story for the community. Because we'll just have a tiny narrative that's written down with the chapter in the newspapers and the archives. Yeah, it's the oral history part. It's the photographs in your family photo albums, the scrapbook materials that your families have. That's where this really goal for something like this lies. Just wanted to put that there.
If there aren't any other questions on.
You can go into like photographs and videos also.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because one thing that, as we all know, what is considered historic from the city of Sacramento standpoint may not meet the definition for us. There are places in our community that we find historic, whether or not the Preservation Society said it was historic. So we need to document that. Like for me, Flowers Fish is historic in Oak Park. So regardless, Flowers Fish Market. So and things of that nature. So we definitely want pictures. Absolutely. And the other thing is that this will be our document. So you all can use this document to go get grants. you all can use the oral history. If you all are hosting, you know, a Black History Month celebration, and you want to use some of the oral histories that we collected, it's available to you. So this is our project. It's not just the community, the city of Sacramento project.
It's all of yours, yes.
So with that being said, I do want to turn it over for you all to actually meet the consultant, get a chance to get to know them, and then have a call then, Damani?
Right.
Okay, and so maybe just kind of you guys' background, so we know that you know what you're talking about, and then walk us through how to navigate this complex document. I feel like I need a cheat sheet or something. So.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for coming. I am Claire Flynn. I am a historian with Page and Turnbull, so we are the consultant that was hired by the city to do this. We specialize in historic preservation, so everything that has to do with history is kind of our forte. For this project in particular, I'm the project manager, so I'm kind of leading our team, our efforts, the writing. I've done a lot of the reading and research gathering and listening to all of your stories and everything we've heard from the students, from the oral histories that we received so far, and then trying to put it together into this history. You already know I'm from Sacramento, and I've been with Page and Turnbull for about 5 years. And prior to that, prior to this project, I actually also worked on the historic context statement for the African American community in Santa Barbara. So we
with Healing Justice.
With Healing Justice. Yeah. So that's probably enough about me, but I'll let you know a little more about Carew. Say a few words about yourself.
So my background is primarily in landscape design and urban planning. I have degrees in that. And I did a PhD because that was the only way one can teach in the university nowadays, with an emphasis on historic research in Northwest Georgia regarding the community between African Americans and the Cherokee Nation. I think it's important to, I think this project is important because I think it's like an origin story in terms of Sacramento. I mentioned earlier that my father was an illegal immigrant, which in doing genealogy, we discovered about 5 years ago that all those years we knew there were things that were unknown about him, but to learn that, and to me, it points out that was a really critical element of our family history. And I think this document offers an opportunity to create a connective history of Sacramento from all the individual stories that are here in not only in this room, but also in the community itself. And so that aspect of it, that historic aspect of it, I find really compelling. So I encourage you to reach out, because your story, you represent not only your family, but also your neighbors that you're connected to. So please consider sharing the document. Not only is there an online copy, but there are also additional copies to get that kind of input from neighbors. And that's one of the, and that, I think that's not one, it's a primary way of bringing the history of Sacramento together, of Black Sacramento together, but to put it in a form that is acceptable to everyone. I come from Harlem, and there are just incredible stories and histories that have been written about it, but that has been, of course, over many years. But it's wonderful to think that this document has the potential to be the primary or one of the first documents to coalesce all of this information
and to be set apart as a reference. And this will be just as I went to Atlanta and talked about going through newspaper archives in the archives there to research African Americans and Cherokees in the Northwest of Georgia. This will be a document that someone wanting to explore academically, intellectually, how the community and Sacramento came together. This will be a resource because finally all those little stories, all that family, neighborhood, community information has been coalesced into a document that starts to present it. Thank you.
See, Imani can.
You what? I'll get the money ready.
Okay. It's just curious that.
While we're getting the money up, another thing, and I know we have people that got kids that work in the motion picture industry and things of that nature. This could be used to potentially for movie producers that want to come here, right? And you know, want to shoot a movie and want to know, how did Sacramento look in the 70s? How did it look in the 80s? Who was here? You know, this is what can be used for that as well. So very useful.
Yeah. Okay, so the other member of the Cajun Turnbull team is Dr. Lonnie Fisher from Sacramento, and part of our efforts.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, good evening. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be with you. I wish I was there in person, but you know, alas, here I am in the great state of Delaware. Yes, there is such thing as, you know, the state of Delaware. People do live here. Well, I am a Sacramento native. Born and raised in Sacramento. Graduated from C.K. McClatchy High School, class of 1997. Lynette went to school with me. Okay. And I also recognize some folks in the room. Kyle Hightower. What's going on, brother? How you doing? Did he leave? Oh. Anyway, so it was just good to see some familiar faces in the room for sure. My family, in terms of my family's history and background, so my dad was originally from Texas. He was born in a town called Wharton, Texas in 1942, which is also the hometown of Dan Rather, believe it or not. But he, along with so many others during World War II, during the Second Great Migration, moved out west, first to Los Angeles, where he and his siblings and my grandmother lived for a couple of years before moving north to Stockton, California. And it was in Stockton where my dad, grew up, and I went to elementary, middle, and high school, graduated from Edison High School in Stockton, class of 1960. And after he graduated from high school, they decided to relocate to the big city of Sacramento, which, to my dad growing up in Stockton, Sacramento was like San Francisco, So, when my dad came to Sacramento, he just always reminisced about just how vibrant the Black community was at that time. And for him, it was an exciting world to be a part of. So, despite the relative small size of the Black community, but nonetheless, there was just a lot of energy, a lot of activity, a lot of important Black institutions, Black controlled institutions, businesses, obviously, important churches, St. Andrews, Shiloh, but also you had, some, restaurants and entertainment spaces. And it was a very vibrant, small, but yet vibrant, dynamic place. And so fast forward, my dad went to City College, Sac State, majored in history, went to Stony Brook University in New York to pursue his PhD. And his doctorate was actually on African Americans in California. In fact, my father, James Fisher, is one of the pioneers in the study of African Americans in California. A lot of folks who would go on to pursue this field, this specific topic, would have to at some point come across my father's dissertation, where he looked at the social and political development of African Americans in early California, and he's he was my inspiration. I used to watch him teach. He taught at Sacramento City College for a number of years, and when I was in high school, I would get out of school, walk down to City College, and watch him teach, and he was and still is my role model and hero, and I decided to pursue the discipline of history, largely because of him and his influence. But as far as like my research, which looks at really the residential segregation, the origins of residential segregation in Sacramento, and most importantly, the way that African Americans and their allies organized to fight against housing discrimination in the city, which I think is a very important story to tell. I mean, too often, we dwell on how African Americans were, the victims of racism, institutional racism, but we don't talk about how folks resisted racism. And Sacramento has a very important role in the fight for fair housing. Some of the most important, well, at least one of the most important court cases in fair housing took place right here in Sacramento County, which is something that I documented in my dissertation. Ming versus Horgan, by the way, which is covered in this historical context. But I was, I'm gonna be honest, I was really inspired, not just by my father, but when you talk about the history of African Americans in Sacramento, you have to start with Clarence Caesar. And Clarence Caesar, who worked for the Office of Historical Preservation for many, many years, is really you want to talk about the dean. I consider him the dean of Sacramento Black history, because his master's thesis was really the first attempt to provide a comprehensive history of African American settlement in Sacramento. And so I want to give credit where credit's due. Anytime you're looking at the history of African Americans in the city of Sacramento, you really have to start with Clarence Caesar. I would also add that the David Coven, right? Longtime Sacramento legend, activist, organizer. He's done an awful lot to preserve the history and to bring it up to date. So I would encourage folks to look at his work. So I consider myself to be, students of theirs, and my work was, really inspired by, what they did, and I was just simply trying to build upon that foundation that they laid.
You. And so who are your parents, Devani, just so folks know who are your family?
So my father's James A. Fisher. James Adolphus Fisher is my father. Long time. He was an educator. He taught at Sacramento City College. He actually started the ethnic studies department at Sacramento City College back in the late 1960s. During the movement where, many colleges were beginning to develop their own ethnic studies program. My father was right there on the front lines here in Sacramento to create that program at Sacramento City College. My mother is Cheryl Fisher, the late Cheryl Fisher. She passed away in 1997. She lived in she was born and raised in Sacramento. And I used to think, at one time that my mom knew everybody in Sacramento. I couldn't go anywhere. You know, she'd be like, hey, what's your friend's last name? I was like, oh man, she went to school with so-and-so. Oh, she used to hang out with so-and-so. Oh, she knew so-and-so's brother. You know, and folks, a lot of the old timers too in Sacramento, it's like a, 6 degrees of separation. Most people know each other, and has a real, that older generation, there's a real kind of communal feel. Yeah, so my mother, unfortunately, she passed away. She died way too young. While she was here, she made an impact. Was a member of the Sacramento Black Nurses Association, which I understand is no longer in existence. Was very active in the community, and she was, she and some of her colleagues from the Sacramento Black Nurses Association would always set up a tent at the festivals, and providing health screenings and sharing information to the community about raising awareness around health and stuff. So,
And then your
I
sister.
keep going. You want to talk about my sister too? We talk about everybody.
Oh, well, I just need folks to know who you are and who your family is. So when I was thinking with Clatchy, his sister was coming in as a teacher at my class, and that means something. We don't have a lot of Black teachers here in Sacramento, and so it was good to see a Black face coming in, teaching kids.
Did she teach you, Lynette?
Oh, no, she didn't teach me. I wish that I would be a little bit younger, but she was coming out of Cleveland. But I was in Atlanta when she was teaching at, I think, Emory University. Any questions for Damani or any of our consultants?
Hey, shout out to Paige and Turnbull, by the way. I just wanted to just acknowledge, the work that Paige and Turnbull did. Paige and Turnbull is, they've been in the business for a long time. They've been doing great work. I'm familiar with Paige and Turnbull because we used to lose bids, contracts to Page and Turnbull when I was working for a JRP Historical Consulting. So I've been very familiar with Page and Turnbull's work for years. You couldn't ask for a better partner, collaborator in this project. Claire Flynn, just the consummate professional, project manager extraordinaire. I mean, what we see. Yeah. I just had to add that. Sorry.
Well, I thank you, and thank you so much. I know it's super late there, so you're more than welcome to stay at the meeting, but I know you have a family and things to do, so we just.
Oh, everyone's asleep. I'm good.
Okay.
Let me say one thing to Damani, thank you for the Zoom call, for being with us. I want to let you know, Clarence Caesar is one of our advisory panel members, so he's looking over the document and providing comment on it. So even today, he's involved with this effort to document.
Well, that makes me real nervous.
Hey, you're doing a good job. Your work is beyond reproach.
Well, I'm sorry, what'd you say, Carson?
Your work is beyond reproach.
Oh, with that. Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, Carson. Appreciate it.
So if we don't have any questions, I just want to start opening up on the floor because we are recording. And so there are some histories that need to be told. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Sorry to interrupt. So really quick, I guess, before we get into open comment, questions, everything, Drew and I just wanted to give you a really quick overview of how that big document over there is organized so that when you pick up a copy, you have an idea of where to go in it to read what you're most interested in reading about. It's pretty big. It's about 140 pages right now. So we want to help you navigate through it. And because we really want you guys to be able to find what you're most interested in and give us your feedback and tell us what we missed, what we got wrong, what we got right, what we need to add. We want to make this the best document we can for you guys and make it as accurate as possible. So we're just gonna really quickly go through how this thing is laid out. So this slide here is just showing you how it's organized very briefly. Everything in gray is sort of introductory background information. And what is the project? How did it start? What is this for a context statement? But the real meat and potatoes of the document, where the history part is all of those sections in the middle in colored, highlighted in colors. So as you can see here, we've divided this very broad, big, complex history up into 5 themes. And we recognize that these aren't the only themes that are relevant to local African American history, but we just decided from what we've read, the information that we've received so far, these are the ones that sort of rose to the top. And we also have to get this done by the end of May next year, so there's only so much we can cover. But we recognize we're going to continue to tweak and add and amend to those. So this is our starting point. And you may notice if you read more than one section, there's a little bit of overlap because history isn't linear. Some things may influence another thing, and so you may see a little bit of repetition, but we try to avoid that as much as possible. And then I'm going to let Drew tell you a bit about the first chapter.
So what's great about the chapter 1, migration and settlement, it's like a history course, an abbreviated history course for you. If you're not born and raised here, if you're like me, you're a transplant, and for years have been thinking about how to know more about Sacramento and how it came about. This chapter provides that kind of background. So the chapters are organized. Well, I should say, let me start with this chapter, that it's organized into 3 time periods. There's reference to, so that those time periods are 1850 to 1900, 1900 to 1940, and 1940 to 1988. And there is reference in some of the chapters, and particularly the first chapter, as to the history and development of California and the Sacramento area prior to 1850, that is around 1830, the 1800s. So what I have, and reading this over again today, I thought there's 2 dates that I think provides a great frame of reference. One is 1850. 1850 is when California became a state. And to think about prior to 1850, this was not American. This was not even Spanish. It was Mexican. And so there is reference, and particularly I read the Santa Barbara historic context statement. There's reference to African Americans being brought to Mexico with the Spanish militia expeditions to discover gold and conquer Mexico. So we have an early presence in the Western United States, in California, because California was part of Mexico before the gold rush. And so the gold rush really kind of turned the whole thing upside down. So 1850 is a good kind of date to keep in mind. And also 1865. 1865 is the end of the Civil War. And what's important about that is that there was so much happening in and around that date in Sacramento. A lot of progressive kind of work. I attended the celebration at St. Andrews on Sunday, and it's kind of phenomenal to think of how progressive they were in not only in developing the culture of that church, but in terms of campaigning for civil rights and for the end of slavery before that. So, so that's really important to remember. 1850 to 1900, 1900 to 1940, and from 1940 to 1970 or 1980. So the first period talks about the presence of African Americans in California by way of the Spanish, but also by way of overland from the east. You had entrepreneurial and very daring African Americans like James P. Beckworth and William A. Liederdoff having a presence in California. The early 1850 to 1900s, there is the document covers the presence of African Americans. And interestingly, here are some numbers to give you a sense of the scale of our presence here. In 1950, in the year of California statehood, there was 191 African Americans in Sacramento. By 1890, you had so by 1860, 10 years later, that was 394. But even by 1990, you had the pressure of really restrictive ordinances and discriminatory policies that were restricting African Americans. So there was this wild kind of time during the gold rush in which it was a free fall, in which African Americans were fulfilling opportunities for service and professional services and otherwise. But after that, with statehood came these restrictions that prevented a lot of the expansion, not only in employment, but also in housing. And that's how the West End became designated as the the only or one of the few opportunities for not only African and other ethnic groups. That's the really wonderful difference with Sacramento history, is that the African American community was really living in conjunction with other ethnic groups that were also being denied employment and housing opportunities. Okay, and so this chapter also covers the Great Migration for 1900 to 1940. Your relatives, similar to mine, many left the South and moved to the north and to the west, and this is really covered in this chapter. And then from 1940 to 1970, there is the second migration. So that's for chapter 1. Claire's going to cover chapter 2.
I'm going to try to go kind of quickly through these, so because we want to make sure that we have time to hear from all of you. So chapter 2 covered business.
And right before you start, the food will be here at 7:30. So as you guys are leaving, you guys can take food to go.
So chapter 2 covers businesses and commercial development. And again, it's divided into 2 time periods, the pre-World War II period and the World War II and post-war periods. And that's just to reflect kind of major shifts that were happening with Black businesses and Black business ownership and economic development between those 2 time periods. And then within those 2 sections, we sort of split it up into a section on labor and employment. So we can talk about the types of work and jobs that African Americans were doing during those time periods, and of course the discriminatory forces that were limiting the availability of jobs. And then the second section, we cover Black businesses in commercial areas. So in that section, we talk about types of Black owned and operated businesses that existed, where they were located, and again, the forces that were impacting their development and growth in those 2 time periods. And I think the kind of main difference between the pre-war and post-war periods is the first one, we talk mostly about the West End, because that's mostly where the local African American community was centered during that pre-war period. And in the post-war period, we talk about the redevelopment of the West End, the destruction of a lot of Black businesses and the impacts on Black business owners as a result of redevelopment, and then the sort of reemergence, reestablishment of other Black businesses and neighborhoods outside of the West End, so places like the Park in Del Paso Heights and Meadowview.
Okay, then, so chapter 3, similarly organized in the time periods 1839 to 1880 and 1850 to 1840. And it looks at the development, you've heard mentioned St. Andrew's Methodist and Episcopal Church and Shiloh Baptist Church, that were two of the first churches established and remain and became two of the largest churches in Sacramento.
They were also the earliest black churches on the West Coast.
Yes.
Which is really important to know.
So what's interesting in this chapter is that by 1965, there were 35 listed African-American churches in Sacramento. And of course, that has declined with population since then.
Chapter 4 is about civic engagement, activism, and the fight for civil rights since 1850. And again, we divided it into 3 different sections. And the first one, we discussed the prominent role that churches, church leaders, and church congregations played in the fight to expand Black rights from around 1850 to 1916. The second part of that, we shift to activism and resistance, largely led by the NAACP, the local branch, and their work fighting housing discrimination, education discrimination, employment discrimination from around 1916 to 1960, as well as other grassroots activism that was led by other members of the community during that period. And then lastly, that section shifts to a period where there were new approaches to resistance and community uplift that came out of community groups and organizations, student organizing, other groups that were inspired by the sort of more direct approaches of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, the Black Power movement, Black Consciousness movement, all of those things, and the culmination of all those efforts in the election of the first African-American elected officials to Sacramento.
And chapter 5 is really kind of a conglomerate of prominent people and events that occurred in Sacramento in music, theater, and fine art. There's a section on Black journalism and the 3 or 4 major newspapers that preceded the Sacramento Observer, which has been a long-term newspaper and still continuing. There's a section also on social clubs, fraternities, and sororities. Many families have been affiliated with social organizations that were. What's interesting is that they're not just focused on social aspect, but also on community service. And then there is a kind of spectrum of athletes engaged, athletes from Sacramento engaged in sports, from baseball, soccer, and baseball, football, and basketball in Sacramento. So that being the last chapter, do you want to talk about, or Carson, do you want to talk about feedback in terms of moving forward with the document?
Sure, just to repeat what I said earlier. So we have kind of a soft deadline of December the 15th to get back some comments on this first draft of the historic overview. I invite all of you to go to the city's project website. If you Google the term Sacramento African American Experience Project, it'll take you right to the web pages. You can see a little bit more detail. For those of your friends and family members that want to see this document, there's a way to go to that link and download a copy of the document. And there are also other information about recorded oral history and some of the things that have happened so far, and then to give you a better sense of what the timeline is going forward after December.
If folks have pictures that they want to submit, what is the best way for people to submit photos that they want included in the document?
I would say, reach out to me and shoot me an email or shoot Sean DeCourcy an email. That information is on the slide that we're kind of rolling throughout the meeting. And then I can, or Sean can get in touch with you and follow up. We can scan the items that you have. We won't take them away from you, but we'll just find a way to scan them so that we can safely make a copy of your the information once there. So yeah, things like family photo album, scrapbooks, things like that, or just a gold mine of information about the community and your lives here. So yeah, think about what you can share with us so we can kind of make copies of from you.
Yeah,
Yes.
especially for areas outside of the West End. I think we don't have very many photos for, African American presence in even Oak Park, Del Paso Heights, Meadowview. It'd be great to be able to see more of that. Yeah.
So is that information in here? Yes.
That's not in the print. It's online.
Not in the book.
No,
But
it's
if you go to the web page, we'll do it African American. Yeah, if you go there, you'll see it, yeah.
And what's interesting is what was the name? So I saw an email come through and I didn't have the context and I was like, what? And it said the Negro directory or
Oh, I
something.
see, yeah.
And I thought this was something they were coming up with, and I was just on the email, and I was like, not comfortable saying Negro, like, I thought it was a new document, but it was a document that.
Document from the 60s.
And it was a red flag when it came across my email, I was like, oh, no.
By the Sacramento.
By the observer, but it had all of the businesses,
All
the businesses at that point.
All the fraternity and sorority organizations and the boards of directors. The NAACP established a credit union because of bad lending practices here, where, because of redlining and other things that denied Black folks the opportunity to get loans, fix up their properties, or invest in business. So the NAA established a credit union. So all that was in this so-called Negro directory from 1965. So it's a really important source of information.
So I think we want to open it up to you guys, right? We're ready to.
Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes and just want to open it up for you all to tell some stories while we're waiting for the food smells so good. While we're waiting on the food, we're going to bring the food in. So feel free to jump in. If not, I'll start calling people out.
Yeah. Ask us questions, tell us things you think it's important for us to include. Look through it while we've been sitting here and you notice something was wrong or right or missing, let us know. Anything.
I think 3 people come in, so please introduce yourself, how long you've been in Sacramento, and particularly what area. Commissioner, we'll start with you. Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been in before, so I think I'm speaking very loud. It sounds like that to me. With that said, as connects all the offers, I am a long-term resident here in Meadowview. I am a city official. I am on the commissioner with the Planning and Design Commission here in Sacramento, as well as the board of the Housing Authority Advisory, the field board, and the city commissioner with the Retirement Appeals Commission. To that, we moved to Sacramento. Oh, we did, believe it or not, back in '74, and north side of town in K Park, which is military housing. In K Park, we were one of
Handful, right?
African American families. In fact, in that small group, when you might is will remember unit, Evelyn Ashford, the Olympic sprinter. She was a neighbor, lived 150 yards away. Her sister, Eunice, was faster than Evelyn. Her older sister, Jean, was faster than Eunice, and her brother Richard was as fast as all of them. But Evelyn was one of the Olympics. name is blanking out. Denise Harris is married to him. He was the head of the Urban League for a short term a few years ago.
Duluth, Shelby.
Duluth, another neighbor, about 100 yards away. Again, well, that's just state park for base housing. From there, in 77, we moved over here to Meadowview, end of 77, to which I call home. You know, I lived in Los Angeles. I worked in film and television about 9 months every year. Went back home, but always maintained residency here in Meadowview. To that, I was here when this, where we're sitting, the jumbo market, rollery, barbershop, Derek Butler there owned the record shop. Fortunately, Derek, a buddy of mine, died in a plane crash. He was flying back from Vegas, flying himself. And anyway, that's another story. Over on Henrietta, those 50 million.
Favorite street. I said, that's my favorite street with no sidewalk. Street with no sidewalk.
It's one of those, like, I'm comfortable with kind of having sidewalks. It's just that country living. For those of you who have visited or grew up in the South, there weren't fences. It was just space. You know, you walk through and hey, you didn't really look at your neighbor. You just say, hey, better than hey, well, you might have got something. But folks out here, a lot of folks in the north side are from Mobile, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, because of the base closures in France. And the folks out here on the south side are folks that moved out here when Freeport neighborhood, a lot of people don't realize that's an old military base housing. The executive airport is actually the auxiliary airport for McClellan and Major. In case we blew those bigger bases up, some people could still get away out of the executive. But that's why Freeport neighborhood looks like base housing is doing base housing. But all that to say, the Meadowview folks, with fourth ways where African Americans live. Again, a lot of folks who's looking for familiar faces that I don't see many of, came out of this neighborhood as we explained the largest entertainment, the athletes. It is a long list. To that, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag for just a quick second. Keep it under your head. A project that will emphasize what I just stated in regards to athletes. Those well established, we put it that way, that have come out of Sacramento. And a lot of folks don't know how many folks of that nature did come out of Sacramento and specifically as a Meadowview community. In about 2 years or so, the world will know. But with that, I am long-winded, but that's it.
I get like an email once a week from Mr. Boyd, so you know, be critical, make sure I'm on point. So I appreciate Commissioner Boyd. I'll turn it over to Mr. Grant.
Yeah, I'm actually glad I'm back from the area, coming in 78. And one of the things that, you know, I've seen about Sacramento, like they hadn't finished the Interstate 80, and everybody was still coming through, either going straight through K Street, or L Street, right to the Capitol and circle around, hit 16, and then go to the old way. That's I don't know that as a kid. But I came in 78, and I went to the park over here that was actually was out there by Folsom Lake. It was called, at that time, it was called Nigger Bar. That was a sign, big old sign, in 78, 79, 80, Nigger Bar. And I talked to the ranger. I said, that's kind of, he said, yeah, well, that's then they talk about change it. And he told me in history, he said, because black people's, then when they was here in Sacramento, when they discovered it. And so, you know, folks started working and discovered it. And black people did discover it as well. They ran them out. And they went up there and they discovered gold there. And then they did, they black discovered gold there. They were a lot, 5 years later, they changed the nick right now, the nickel part. The change again?
Yeah.
That was for that long. But then Sacramento, they was all with, our pastor at the time, he told me he was here, he came here in the early 40s. He was telling me about Sacramento, where he was in Del Paso Heights, and he's in Del Paso Heights and over McCullough, say that's the only place that black people live. You know, they had their own restaurants and bars and everything, and all that kind of stuff there on Linda Boulevard. And that's where all the business like this building, a lot of America. So he told me about that. And like, so I got a lot of history with people, for one, not one, but all his on the war. Came to go to the war, a lot of blacks came back, same there, my parents came there, the shipyard. They do something like this, we did something like this as well. And my mother gave a lot of pictures that we got back, gave a lot of pictures, old things, warships, they worked on water women. A lot of women were because men were going to war, and men and women were spread on ships. That Sacramento had a lot of history about building an airplane. It was an airport. I have a little history I learned from people I met here, you know, that came here in 40, 34. And told me how I think it was red line. You know, this only way we could is we couldn't build a white house and place up, but they'll have
Thank you. And I think we've had one other person, Mr. McCain. Can you introduce yourself? How long you been in Sacramento? What area?
I was born here in 1950. Lived here most of my life. I was born in the Heights. And then later on moved to Oak Park. I was in Oak Park when I was in Oak Park when the police shot at the Black Panther in 1959. Right? I was in Oak Park when the police got killed in 1970, and it's a couple of factual errors. Patrolman Bernard Bennett was not killed on May 2nd. He was killed on May 9th. And they didn't start arresting people until May 6th. And the original people arrested, there were 7. The Oak Park 4, Booker T. Cook, Martin King, Syriac, Rellis, and Judge Shriver went on trial. And the case was dismissed at the end of the prosecution's case. So they had been on trial they got arrested, everybody got arrested in May. And they were in jail from May of 1970 to January of 71, when the judge threw the case out after the prosecution's case, because they didn't have enough evidence. To me, it looked like a tactical move, because had he let the case go to jury, then the whole Part 4 would not have been able to be tried again to the double jeopardy. But because he threw it out after the prosecution case was concluded, those 4 could be rearrested for that case to this day. Because it's a cold case, they never solved murder as a criminal offense. So that's some of my experience.
Do you want to share any of your other experiences?
I'll do it.
You got a real story to tell.
Mr. McKinney, I would like to sit down with you doing oral history.
No problem. I want to bring a couple of other people in who were there at the time as well.
Billy Jennings, Billy X Jennings, you know him.
Sharon Pinckney, Marvel Lewis Brunson. And
Fred Foote.
Still alive. He Cook was teaching out in Sac State. Syriaco is still around. Jack Shriver lives up in Maryville, UC, somewhere like that. And I'm concerned kind of long with Martin, running back and forth to Long Beach and Sacramento. Definitely, they're still alive. So, you know, you get some good facts from them about that particular.
Let's talk, please. Yeah, that's a great story.
Does anyone else want to talk and tell their story?
I didn't see on the grant house, I didn't see Miss Huntington under the city council. I see the picture
that would have been the same tenure of 60s. You guys should have been in the city, you had 100 people over already in the, city.
Need y'all to edit. Those people on city council. I heard this. So, Kelly, I just took her WCIC. Kelly Carney. Yeah. And she didn't take the whole mess.
But I think I'm saying something about my neighborhood, my community, though. But I think you guys did an outstanding job on the road. But, because I was doing some research recently, lately, and I remember last meeting was talking about the redistricting, how that happens. Well, it turns out that that's how Meadowview's history is stuck under that, because of the Roby tenure, which lasted a long time. Because everybody thought Meadowview was a part of Green Haven, so a lot of that stole why the blacks were slowed down here, because they figured, because Green Haven, they don't have a lot of business in Green Haven, they live their life, and that's fine. And that's why Meadowview ran like that, so it makes sense why Henrietta is like that. Of course, everybody from the Meadowview, they want to live on Henrietta. I'm the street right over, so I know. So that, I was thinking, do you think we would be a smart thing to like, her husband, Judge Roby, was top superior judge, you don't need no higher than him. Like he's 8 now. He's super smart. Do you think like write to him, asking him about his wife's tenure?
Yeah.
Would be kind of, because from what I've studied, they were real close. They were real close, husband and wife, did everything together, knew everything. And I think that would be good, especially for him being a judge, because he would know the crime. Because I've always been so as bad as they talked about Meadowview, chief on day. And I'm looking at you, we're like, never agreed on the same thing as this. It did like, no matter how much. Like everybody say they do, that's really what's been messing up the South Sacramento history. It's really just been throwing it on, you know.
Thank you for that.
But that's all, that real quick, right on point, right? The latest, Sacramento Police Department, quarterly crime statistics has Meadowview as the second lowest, crime area out of the 8 council districts in the city of Sacramento. For the last decade plus, council district 8, Meadowview, right, redistricting from last year, which is Meadowview, Parkway, Phoenix Park, most of Valley High, and a portion of North Laguna. Right. Maintain at 90 to 95% of the time, the third lowest crime specific area in the entire city of Sacramento, that 8 council districts. Again, that's going over a decade plus. Right. With that, we, the council district 8, has fallen no further than the 4th position. And we have several times ascended to the number 2 lowest time we can find in Sacramento. Just for quick reference, the 1 and 2 that have maintained about 90-95% of the time, being the lowest, second lowest, is council district 1, which is lowest component, and council district 7, which is Green Haven, Pocket, and Land Park, and then there's Meadowview, ladies and gentlemen. So that misnomer and straight out and out lies that has been perpetuated and continued through the media and from official sources to degrade the Meadowview community. Why? Because crime does what? It drags down the property values. So those who bought property back in 72, to your point, when council district came about, if you do your research, you'll find out the land grab that went on by city council members at that time who owned a lot of the portions of council districts and living specific. The development that's coming up and it's already in, has come up and it continues to build Golden Corral. Look who owns that, who's developing that, when he purchased it 3 years before Elton became a city. Why? Because Black UL Grove was gonna incorporate, escalated his property value, sat on it for about 30 years, now developing it, making of minutes. And from that, we take you to, I'm gonna wrap it up, and that's, like, you know, so kind of power. But with that, the current transportation priority plan, the Sacramento is going through. One of the areas is that frontage road of 99, where Gold Corral is to put a sidewalk in where there isn't a sidewalk. That council person that owns that area is building his own damn sidewalk because of the land grab that he did, but understand the game of how the city maneuvers to get stuff in the city to go in their service. If you don't know the game, you're gonna get played. Quite simple, and it was just one that, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Period.
That, so no, okay, so a little bit about. But you gonna come next time? Anybody else? So, bring to next place, and then if you guys want to still fellowship and talk, we can do that, but I'm gonna go to Congress. I want to make sure you guys eat, so.
You coming out for a
So.
David Cocaine, you know, on our stage. David Cocaine.